Welcome to the PS Dental Podcast, where we discuss dentist stories from their paths to dentistry to their lessons along the way. I'm your host, Ryan McGarvey, the proud son of a dentist. In this episode, we're speaking with Dr. Jennifer Davis of Cleona Dental in Cleona, Pennsylvania. Our conversation explores a wide array of topics, from Dr. Davis's unique journey from dental hygienist to dentist, to her firm belief in the power of continuing education and the profound impact of mentorship on her career choices. Dr. Davis also shares her approach to integrating comprehensive and aesthetic dentistry, emphasizing the importance of function before aesthetics. We delve into how her personal values shape the practice's culture, fostering a work environment that balances high-end dentistry with fun. This episode is packed with insights on creating a fulfilling and balanced dental practice, highlighting the significance of community involvement and team bonding activities outside of the workplace. You guys are going to love this conversation. I can't wait to share it with you. Without further ado, here's our interview with Dr. Jen Davis. Well, here we are, Proud Son Dental Marketing Podcast with Dr. Jen Davis. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking to have a nice conversation with you about you have a unique path to becoming a dentist, and I'm going to ask you some questions about that as well as your view of the industry. So great to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So let's get started with the questions. So your early career path, your career in dentistry began as a dental hygienist before obtaining your certificate from the University of Pittsburgh. How has this role shaped your understanding of oral healthcare and influenced your decision to become a dentist?
Wow. So that is a great question. For me, beginning my career as a dental hygienist simply started because as a high school student, I would say, much younger than that, even starting, I knew I wanted to be a dentist. But in my household, in my family, we don't have a long lineage of people who necessarily went on to continuing education. And if I could self-reflect back there to that time when my parents were trying to coach me, I probably looked like I couldn't hold my attention for very long at pretty much anything, a little bit ill-focused. So our family dentist, actually, his daughter had started her career as a dental hygienist. And she had just actually, at the time when I was beginning dental hygiene school, she had actually just exited dental school herself. So she had taken that path of doing hygiene and then moving on to dental hygiene or moving on to dental school. And my parents thought that might be a great way for me to get into the field and see if I liked it. And if I did, I'd certainly continue to persevere through. And so that's the stepping stones it took for me. Certainly a bit of a weird path, not a weird path, but a longer path than what some perhaps take. But, things happen for a reason. And it has, as you first asked, the foundation of my entering into dentistry has been phenomenal in that fashion. It is wonderful to have a great respect for the basics of dental health care. And that's, of course, where it starts. It has helped me have a great respect for my team members, though as time goes on, I probably have less and less of a recall as what it's like to be a team member. But I was a dental team member for 10 years before I went to dental school. So I knew what it was like to be an employee in a practice with someone else's vision. So that has helped me to maybe take a little bit from this office, take a little bit from that office, and sort of blend together what I had seen through my years as an employee to navigate a path that I thought would work well for me.
That's beautiful. I love that you were able to have that level of experience, which I think most dentists aren't able to get because generally, straight from undergrad to dental school. So I think it's wonderful that you're able to be in a couple of different practices and kind of merge the philosophies to fit what you were going for best. So your transition into dentistry, after a decade as a dental hygienist, you pursued a bachelor's degree in chemistry and later a dental degree from UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. Can you describe the moment or experiences that prompted you to take this significant step in your career?
Absolutely. When I got done with dental hygiene school, I knew I wasn't done with my schooling. So while I was working for those 10 years as a hygienist, I was working on a chemistry degree. And I was pretty certain at that time, because there was a distinct moment where I had this pivot happen in my world, but I was pretty sure that once I had my chemistry degree completed, that I would not ever be continuing my career in dentistry. I really felt very strong about that. And when I was finishing my chemistry degree in a small school for which there was only 8 other chemistry majors, so we had a lot of individual attention from our faculty and whatnot, all of my other colleagues had their career paths or their next paths lined up. I did not. And it was about 2 months after we graduated, I was in a small pizza shop next to the college that I was attending. And one of my professors, my chemistry professor, was in that restaurant as well, came and sat down with me. I was by myself. He was by himself. Not unusual if you're from a small school where you're used to that small interaction with people. But during our course of our conversation, he was very candid in asking me where I stood with my application processes, because he knew I had applications. He knew where my vision was at that time, and asked me where I was with it, and was bold enough to ask why I didn't have it completed. And I was like a little uncomfortable. And I'm sure my body language reflected that. And basically he said to me, did you ever think that you were applying to the wrong programs? And I looked at him really confused at that point, because I had no clue what he was talking about. And I said, basically, I don't know what you mean. And he says, well, did you ever think that perhaps you need to apply to dental school? And I was really, at the time, I was really quite angry. And that was my first response at what he had said to me. But it took me less than 12 hours to realize that he was exactly right. That's exactly why I wasn't moving ahead rapidly or as efficiently as my classmates were. And so I had applications completed, and then I was into school the very next year. So it didn't take me long after I had that aha moment. It all came together. You find the energy when the passion and the whole story, aligns. And that's how I got to school.
That is fascinating. It was a conversation with a professor at a university that enabled that one-on-one relationship. That was the spark for you. You and you. I could see myself, right? Yeah, I think we all need that person in life sometimes that can view your life from the outside perspective and say, "Hey, Jen, clearly there's a little hesitation here. You are obviously a very driven person, but for some reason you're not full speed ahead for this application process. What's the deal?" And they had their idea of, okay, you should go this direction because I see this for you, and they were right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
100% satisfied, from there forward. Absolutely.
Wow. It's beautiful that you can have a relationship like that in life. That's wonderful. So you graduate from dental school. From my understanding of your timeline, you then arrive and you join Dr. Johnson's practice. Was that immediate after dental school?
It was. After dental school, the period of time it took to get licensure and whatnot, after that all came together, in that summer after graduating, I started at the practice of Dr. Frederick Johnson. Yes.
Okay. So upon joining Dr. Frederick Johnson's practice and eventually acquiring it, how did you integrate your vision and philosophy into Cleona Dental? And how has this philosophy evolved over time?
Well, that's a lot. So one of the reasons why I joined this practice was because of the fact that I had actually in the past worked with him, and I knew his career paths and his thought process through treating patient care. I had been a hygienist under his employment in the past. And I felt strongly that I had a very similar vision. One of the things that I needed, though, was to find my own path in that comprehensive care, because he did have definitely a path of comprehensive dentistry at the practice. But I needed some guidance to help me move forward in my own. And he had recommended that I speak to a colleague of his that he knew had attended the Pankey Institute. And so he said this gentleman seemed to, in his mind, have it all together and was a happy, contented family guy and just seemed to have a smile on his face and just seemed to be able to have some good wisdom when they had conversations. So he asked me to have a conversation with this other dentist about the Pankey Institute. So I gave this gentleman a call. It is the father of Dr. Bill Moffitt, who we all know at the Institute now. So I called and spoke to his dad about Pankey Institute. And our conversation wasn't long. I don't remember much about it, but he was gracious enough to come to the phone and entertain a conversation with me. And shortly after that, I got enrolled in a class that was traveling around, if you will. I didn't go to Key Biscayne for my first class. They were doing some localized introductory courses to the Institute. And this would have been like in 2003, I think. And at that time, I went to the course and it was just a fantastic day. And one of the people who I heard speak that day, Mike Fling, who is a great mentor of mine, love Mike Fling. And he was speaking at the course on that day. And so it was very inspiring. I didn't know that later on he'd become the mentor that he had been for me through time. But nonetheless, that was the impetus to get me in the door, to get me actually to go down to what at the time was what we call at the Institute, the C's. So I started to C1 basically shortly after that. And that's been a very strong support system for me throughout my years of dentistry, and it remains that way today.
So Dr. Johnson saw Dr. Moffitt and believed that the way that he was practicing and the balance that he had within his life was something that you would find of interest. Not that Dr. Johnson had gone to Pankey himself, or to the Pankey Institute himself, but he saw that the way that Dr. Moffitt was practicing and thought, hey, this is a conversation that you should have just to figure things out on your own. Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah, I later told Bill that story during a meeting when we were sitting next to one another. It's fun to share those stories of how people get connected.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So because you touched on Pankey, I think this is a good segue. So you're actively involved with several dental organizations and have a significant role in education as an alumni and visiting faculty of the Pankey Institute now. How important is continuing education in your profession, and what impact has it had in your practice at Cleona Dental?
Continuing education is extremely important, obviously. Things change all the time. And yeah, that's my only, the most basic thing for me to say. Things change all the time, and you just sort of need to continue to keep your nose to the grindstone. It is always fun to relearn something, because even for tasks that we do every day, there are small modifications that happen or ideas that are shared through others through learning that can be really empowering to help you see things differently and make life easier. And I think that's the one thing that people don't understand sometimes when they have a block around continuing education. It's there to help you, and every opportunity you have to try to embrace that and to just figure out how you can incorporate something as someone else's gift of learning their struggles and trying to share with others to move forward in a way that provides daily balance, less frustrations, and better outcomes for your patients and for you. So yeah, continuing education is you can't beat it. It's the building blocks of a professional career, I think.
No doubt. I'm curious. Obviously, you've You mentioned that you went down to Pankey, or you started those classes in 2003, and you eventually made your way into a faculty role where you were then teaching. What have you learned, or from your experience, what has been the difference in teaching versus being the student within continuing education? What have you gotten out of each?
So the difference would just simply be that you're sharing with others a platform for which you're asked to speak about, how you incorporate it into your daily practice and what it means while you're moving through cases. So the presentation of it would be the difference. But what's really fun about it is the interactive dialogue that happens even while you're teaching, because to say that you are like instructing and you're not learning is really to differentiate yourself from the whole process. And what's exciting is the fact that you can get up there and now your role for this segment of the day is to present a topic for which you have some information about. So you present your topic. But what's exciting is the dialogue that happens, depending on your style, while you're speaking or afterwards, while you're trying to get your hands onto the actual process to make it happen. Because we as dentists, though we will sit and take in information gladly, we really, 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 really love to work with our hands. So if you put us at a lab bench with some teeth, we're really, really, really happy. So nonetheless, if you can just start those conversations, it's amazing what you learn from the people who you're participating in the process with, because you're just a part of the process, not the focus of the process, just a part of it. So that's really exciting because it is definitely a continued learning process. Just happens in a slightly different way.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. So on the note of comprehensive and aesthetic dentistry, your practice is known for its comprehensive and aesthetic dental care. Can you share your perspective on the importance of aesthetics in dentistry and how it complements overall oral health?
Sure. It's not so uncommon for a patient to present to you a concern that they have about a smile or a tooth that is misplaced or miscolored. That's not an uncommon conversation for a dentist. The part that really makes it a magical connection is when you can start to have what we've learned as co-discovery with the patient, because sometimes those concerns that a patient has about their own mouth have greater fundamental challenges behind it. So one of the magical things that happens is when you can present a patient with a mirror so that you can look jointly at what's happening in their mouth to sort of backtrack into what might be causing that chip on that tooth, or why that tooth is rotated, or why the color here and there. So that process of aesthetics, while can be a beginning conversation, blossoms into function, because if things don't work right, they often don't look right. So they need to work correctly first. And then it's amazing how the beauty of something comes together when they function as they should.
You mentioned the connection of the aesthetic. I love the way that you said that. That was so beautiful about when things don't look right, generally they're not functioning right. It seems like the basis of your philosophy towards dentistry begins with function. Is that generally your approach with your patients? Is it starts with function and then it leads to aesthetics, not the other way around?
Absolutely. You can have the conversation about aesthetics, but it where the rubber meets the road is function. That's so fun because that's where it's all got to work, and that the occlusion or the bite and the functionality of it all, how it harmonizes with your joints, your muscles, and whatnot, is an amazing little ballet. But you need to take the time to look at it to make sure that in the end it all comes together well.
So from multiple conversations, from all the past conversations that we have had about Cleona Dental specifically, and how wonderful of a practice it is, and we do your marketing, so we've been able to build relationships with your patients online, and the dialogue that we've had with your patients, we understand your reputation as a practice is your understanding the value of comprehensive dental care. But your team also has this particular approach where it seems like fun is able to be incorporated very nicely into the high-end dentistry. Can you explain maybe some actionable insights for dentists that are listening? How are they able to implement that balance of, yes, we're going to give you high-end dentistry, but we're also going to have fun doing it? Because I feel like that's a difficult balance to strike. Can you help explain how you got there?
Yes, and that's always a process that we're continuing to try to sort of keep real. But I'm going to go back to the fact that some years ago, I learned that for me, values, my personal values are really important. Once I started to speak my values and have my team work around my values, we started to be able to have a commonality in the office. And sometimes that did mean that in the past, maybe some people who didn't necessarily fit my values had to sort of find their way out the door. But ultimately, I think it starts with having a common set of values that people share. And if you have that comfort and that shared value in the course of your daily work, then then you can fit in fun. And I will thank a good friend of mine, Dave Gordon, who makes it a promise that his days have got to be fun at work. And it took me a moment when he said, we've got to have fun at work. And I kind of looked at him like, fun work? And then, with some reflection, I realized, you know what, I have more fun at the office than I ever had in the past, but to make it a part that's safe and fun with patients and the team is really what makes the day energizing. And if you can get your team, energized and have your workday not be so draining, I think that's pretty key, because ultimately we all need to go home to what's the most important part of our day, which is our family and friends. And if you can leave the workday perhaps energized as opposed to drained, I think that's the key to having yourself have a pretty hot workspace. So we try to work around that philosophy.
It's fascinating because I think a lot of the dentists that I speak to enter, the ownership of their own private practice, and they think, oh, this is what it should be. But you seem to have started with almost a self-reflection of what do I value personally within my work life. And you seem to have almost carved out your practice in the image of what you value. Was that a personal journey almost to figure out, okay, what do I value personally in order to figure out how can I get my practice to reflect that? Do you have what advice could you give to dentists on how to get to that point where you're doing that reflection and figuring out how they should carve out their practice?
I was actually guided through that process by a consultant. I don't know exactly in reflection how we got upon that. But nonetheless, I think in her observance of the practice, she, I think, probably wondered why I was hanging out with all these people 8 days or 8 hours a day, that they just didn't really seem like we all jived together. So we went through a process, and I can do a really quick review of it. But she had me pick out 5 of my favorite people and then write down what I liked about each of these people and maybe 10 things. And then she had me pick out the common denominator between my 5 favorite people. And this didn't happen in one day setting. In fact, I think we did started the exercise, and maybe a month later picked it up, maybe a month later refined it so that I could sort of have some time to really get into it. And it turns out that my 5 favorite people had the 5 characteristics that I felt were really important and were really comfortable with. And so these 5 people don't necessarily know one another. I think in reflection, 1 or 2 of them were family members. 1 was a friend. 1 was a person that I had worked with in the past, but from all different kind of places in my life. But it helped me figure out what my values are in a different kind of fashion. And then to really speak it, to say out loud, hey, this is what's important to me. It's important to me in my personal life. It's going to be important to me in my professional life. And we're going to run the ship according to the values that I think are the most important for this particular practice. And here's how we're going to do it. So it did shake the ship. But in the end, the ship is a much more stable, happier place than where it would have been prior to that. So that's my story of how that got incorporated as the short version.
Wow. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that's super helpful for dentists to hear that exercise specifically, because that's an actionable step they can take themselves of, okay, who are the people that I like the most? That obviously reflects values within me. And they're able to find not just dentists alone, but people generally. It's like, okay, what do I value? Most people don't know that. So looking at the people that they respect and they appreciate, that reflects their values. And I think that's a wonderful exercise. One last question, because I know that we're short on time. On the note, because I think that Cleona Dental balances that comprehensive dental care and fun very, very well. Can you explain, I know that your practice does a lot outside of the walls of Cleona Dental. Can you tell us more about what you guys like to do outside of the practice that helps bond you together and brings that fun element into the practice?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do outside of the office, which I think bonded us together to do more things outside of the office, but we do each quarter do a community service event. So as a group, we decide where we're going to spend some of our extra time during a particular quarter. And through time, we've come to have our particular thing we do during the first quarter or second quarter, that kind of thing. But having time outside of the office where we're intentionally doing something that's not our normal role, I think helps us bring down some of our traditional roles that we have, so we can be more people to people or person to person with one another. And it has led for us to do some, fun things that we do outside the office just to sort of share time. And that can be anything from one of those wine and paint nights that we have seen people share pictures of. Sometimes we go dancing. We love to go in our area. There's this disco that comes around once a year. So Stan's Disco is something we do in March if we can get there as a group. Just fun things to get out and have fun as a group, because they're important people to me and they're important to one another. And sharing that time with each other outside the office just helps to, take the time that we all need to build relationships more completely. And it's an important part of the thing you do when you're fostering a positive work environment.
No doubt. Dr. Jennifer Davis of Cleona Dental, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time on this Monday to have this conversation. I have no doubt that there's a lot of reflections that people can make on implementing not only what you said about your path from becoming a dental hygienist to becoming a dentist, but also how you're able to strike a beautiful balance within your practice and almost make a happy, healthy family within your team. So thank you so much for joining. I greatly appreciate your time, and I hope to talk to you again soon.